The Viking incursions were not brief raids by faceless warriors, but a relentless tide that reshaped kingdoms and shattered empires. Wherever they landed, cities burned. Wherever they marched, cultures splintered. Their scars went deeper than blood and fire, etched into laws, faith, and the trembling heart of Europe. Their legacy was not only conquest, but the haunting silence left in their wake. Among their darkest acts lie truths so violent, so carefully erased, that even history itself seems to recoil from remembering them. The monks of Lindisfarne, slaughter at the dawn of the Viking Age. They came without warning. Out of the mist and morning tide, longships cut across the cold waters of the North Sea and appeared on the northeastern coast of England in June 793. Within hours, the peaceful monastery of Lindisfarne was burning. What began that day was not a mere raid. It was the violent birth of the Viking Age. Lindisfarne, known in Latin as Holy Island, had stood for generations as a sanctuary of faith and learning. Founded by Saint Aidan in the 7th century, it was a sacred heart of Christianity, home to monks who copied holy texts, illuminated manuscripts, and guarded relics of saints. Its isolation had once been its strength, a place apart from the violence of the mainland. But in 793, that very isolation became its curse. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded the event in stark and trembling words. In this year came dreadful forewarnings over the land of the Northumbrians. Immense flashes of lightning and fiery dragons were seen flying in the air. The chroniclers spoke not only of omens but of terror, as if nature itself had tried to warn them of what was coming. When the Vikings landed, there was no negotiation, no demand for surrender. The invaders swept through the monastery with brutal efficiency. According to the annals of Lindisfarne, monks were slaughtered at the altar, their prayers drowned out by the clash of steel and the roar of flames. Others were dragged to the shore, drowned in the freezing surf, or taken as slaves across the sea. Sacred objects were looted, gold and silver chalices stolen, and holy books thrown into the fire. Contemporary monk Alcuin of York wrote in despair, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race." The Church of St. Cuthbert is spattered with the blood of the priests of God. His words carried the weight of a civilization realizing it was no longer safe, that faith itself could not shield them from the wrath of the North. What made the raid so shocking was not only its savagery but its symbolism. Lindisfarne was not a fortress nor a seat of power. It was a place of peace untouched by the sword for centuries. But to the Vikings it was rich in treasure and undefended, the perfect target. In one morning they shattered the illusion that the church was untouchable, that divine walls could protect mortal men. The slaughter at Lindisfarne marked the end of one world and the beginning of another. Over the next decades, Viking raids spread across the British Isles, Northumbria, Mercia, Ireland, and beyond. Monasteries burned, kingdoms fell, and coastal towns lived in constant fear. Lindisfarne's blood-soaked stones became a warning to all of Christendom. The sea was no longer a barrier, and the age of the Norse had begun. The Siege of Paris, Viking brutality meets royal resistance. In the spring of 845, the River Seine carried more than trade and tide into the heart of the Frankish Empire. It carried terror. 120 Viking longships, their carved prows gliding through the mist, sailed upriver toward Paris. At their head was a fierce chieftain known as Reginharus, believed by some chroniclers to be the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. The Carolingian world, already fractured by internal rivalries, braced itself for an assault that would test the strength of an empire. Paris in the 9th century was modest in size but vital in position, a city that guarded the river routes into the empire's core. Charles the Bald, grandson of Charlemagne, ruled over a divided and weary realm. Political turmoil had weakened its armies, and Viking raids had become a grim rhythm of life along the coasts. But this invasion was different. It was not a raid for quick plunder. It was an organized campaign, vast in scale and terrifying in intent. According to the Annals of Saint Bertin, Reginharus's fleet reached Paris during Holy Week, a deliberate choice meant to strike both fear and sacrilege. Before assaulting the city, the Vikings met and annihilated a Frankish force sent to intercept them. The chroniclers write that captured soldiers were hanged from riverside trees as an offering to Odin, their bodies swaying above the water as a grim warning to all who watched. What followed was a siege born of brutality and precision. Paris's defenses, little more than wooden palisades and faith, could not withstand the Viking onslaught. The invaders breached the walls, stormed the churches, and looted relics considered untouchable. The monks of Saint-Germain-des-Prés were forced to witness their sanctuary consumed by fire, their prayers drowned in the screams of the dying. Citizens were tortured, slaughtered, or dragged away in chains. King Charles faced an impossible choice. His nobles demanded protection. His armies were in disarray. In desperation, he turned to gold. To buy peace, Charles paid the Vikings 7,000 livres of silver, an enormous ransom that emptied treasuries but spared the city from total destruction. For the Franks, it was humiliation. For the Vikings, it was revelation. They had learned that terror could yield more than conquest. It could be profitable. The siege of 845 became a lesson etched into the chronicles of both sides. To the Vikings, it proved that even the heart of Christendom could bleed silver. To the Franks, it exposed the cost of disunity. Yet from this devastation came resolve, when Paris was besieged again 4 decades later. In 885-886, it would stand stronger, its walls higher, its people hardened. But in 845, as the longships drifted away heavy with treasure and blood, the river itself seemed to carry the echo of their triumph, a haunting reminder that the age of the Vikings had only just begun. The massacre at Nantes, a cathedral-turned-killing ground on June 24, 843, the feast of Saint John, the city of Nantes, resting along the Loire River in the Frankish kingdom of Brittany, became the stage for one of the most brutal Viking atrocities ever recorded. What unfolded that day was no simple raid for gold or plunder. It was a calculated massacre, swift, merciless, and carried out with chilling precision. At the time, Nantes was a prosperous port and an important religious center. Its cathedral rose as a proud symbol of faith and authority, a place where the people believed no violence could enter. On that feast day, the townspeople and clergy gathered inside for worship. Bishop Gohard of Nantes stood at the altar, leading the congregation in celebration. Outside, the river lay calm, until the Viking ships appeared. According to the Chronicle of Nantes, the longships advanced silently up the Loire before launching their sudden assault. The city's defenses were thin, its citizens unarmed. Panic spread as the Norsemen flooded through the streets, cutting down everyone in their path. Men, women, and children were slaughtered indiscriminately. Those who sought safety fled into the cathedral, the very house of God they believed would protect them. But the sanctuary became a cage. The Vikings stormed the church doors, their blades glinting in the torchlight. Inside, Bishop Gohard was struck down at the altar, still reciting Mass. The congregation fell beside him, priests, monks, and laymen alike. Contemporary sources record it starkly. The bishop was slain as he said Mass, and the people perished with him. In that moment, the sanctity of the cathedral shattered. When the killing was done, the Vikings looted the sacred vessels, tore relics from their shrines, and set fire to parts of the city. Some accounts say captives were taken for slavery. Others suggest the invaders left as swiftly as they came, their ships heavy with silver and silence. Behind them lay a city drenched in blood and disbelief, its faith violated, its leaders slain. The massacre at Nantes was not an isolated act of cruelty. It was part of a broader wave of Viking aggression that swept through the Loire Valley during the 840s. Yet this event stood apart, for it defiled not just life, but sanctity itself. The Vikings had crossed a threshold that even war seldom dared: slaughter within the walls of God's house. From that day forward, the message was unmistakable. No church, no holy ground, and no symbol of faith was beyond the reach of Norse violence. Nantes became both a warning and a wound, remembered in chronicles as the day heaven's refuge turned into a killing ground. The massacre of Iona, monks butchered in sacred sanctuary in the year 806, the remote island monastery of Iona, off the rugged western coast of Scotland, became the scene of one of the bloodiest Viking atrocities in the British Isles. Once the spiritual heart of Celtic Christianity, this sacred island turned into a field of death. Known in Gaelic as Y Chaluim Chile, the Isle of Columba, it had been founded by Saint Columba in 563 and for centuries served as a beacon of faith and learning. It was home to monks who copied scripture by candlelight, produced illuminated manuscripts, and guarded the tombs of kings. But by the early 9th century, its holiness had made it a target. Both the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and the Annals of Ulster record the horror that followed. In 806, a fleet of Viking longships appeared without warning. What happened next was swift and merciless. According to the Chronicles, 68 monks were slain, men of peace cut down by men of the sea. They were unarmed, offering no resistance. The record describes them only as slain by the heathens in Magrafuir, the old Irish name for Iona. This was not the monastery's first taste of Norse violence. An earlier raid in 795 had already left scars, but the massacre of 806 was far greater, an annihilation rather than a warning. Contemporary accounts give few details, but the methods were well known. The Vikings landed suddenly, struck fast, and killed indiscriminately. The monks may have fled toward the chapel, clutching relics and prayer books, or tried to hide among the stones, but Iona offered no escape. In that quiet sanctuary of faith, the sound of hymns gave way to the clash of axes and the cries of the dying. Those who survived abandoned the island. Some escaped to Iona's sister monastery at Kells in Ireland, carrying with them their most precious treasure, the Book of Kells, one of the finest illuminated manuscripts ever created. But even in exile, they could not escape the shadow of the Norse. The monastery at Iona would again be attacked in 825 and 849, its population dwindling with each assault until the sacred island's influence faded into memory. The massacre at Iona was not an isolated act of savagery. It stood among a chain of Viking atrocities, at Lindisfarne, Paris, Nantes, and beyond, that tore through the spiritual and political fabric of medieval Europe. These were not random raids. They were deliberate strikes against symbols of power and faith, designed to shatter belief in safety, to break the illusion that holiness could protect from steel. The blood spilled at Iona marked more than the death of monks. It marked the death of an age of innocence. In the centuries that followed, Europe's coasts would be reshaped by fire, its kingdoms hardened by fear. The memory of these massacres endured not only in ink and stone, but in the boundaries they redrew, the meeting of faith and fury that forged the medieval world.